The moment you stop fighting for them is the moment they realize they've lost control and they don't know how to handle it. Because narcissists don't fear losing you. They fear losing their influence over you. And when you calmly accept their final decision, something inside them breaks. Most people think walking away hurts the narcissist because of absence. That's not true. What truly unsettles them is your lack of resistance. Narcissists operate with an unspoken assumption that they are the central force in every interaction, especially when it comes to decisions that affect other people. Control for them is not always loud or obvious. It often shows up in subtle expectations. They assume that whatever choice they make will trigger a predictable response, usually one that keeps them in a position of importance. When they reach a final decision, it is rarely about closure. It is about maintaining psychological dominance. They expect that decision to pull you into a reaction, questioning, negotiating, or trying to change their mind. This expectation is where their sense of control lives. It's not the decision itself that gives them power, but the emotional movement it creates in others. If you react strongly, it confirms that they still have influence over your thoughts and behavior. Even negative reactions like anger or frustration serve the same purpose because they keep the connection alive. What they don't anticipate is the absence of that reaction. When someone accepts their decision without resistance, it interrupts the entire pattern they rely on. There is no emotional feedback to validate their position, no signal that they still matter in the same way. This creates a kind of internal confusion because their usual methods no longer produce results. Instead of feeling in control, they are left facing a situation where their decision exists on its own, without the emotional reinforcement they depend on, which destabilizes the sense of authority they are used to holding. Their sense of power doesn't come from who they are. It comes from how others react to them. A narcissist studies emotional responses, even if unconsciously, and learns which behaviors trigger attention, validation, or pursuit. Over time, they begin to rely on these reactions as proof of their significance. If someone becomes anxious, tries harder, or seeks reassurance after being pushed away, it reinforces the idea that they still hold emotional leverage. This is why even negative attention can feel rewarding to them, because it confirms they can still influence your internal state. When they make a strong move, like creating distance or declaring a final decision, it is often designed to provoke a response. They expect you to feel unsettled, to question yourself, or to attempt to regain connection. That reaction becomes the real outcome they are looking for. It keeps the dynamic alive and positions them as the one with control over the emotional direction of the interaction. If that reaction doesn't come, the structure they depend on starts to collapse. Without emotional feedback, there is nothing to measure their impact against. No anxiety from you means no confirmation of importance. No attempt to change their mind means no validation of authority. They are left in a space where their actions no longer produce the expected emotional return, and that absence disrupts the cycle they rely on to feel in control, forcing them into a position where influence can no longer be assumed or reinforced. Silence and detachment don't look powerful on the surface, but psychologically, they disrupt the entire pattern a narcissist depends on. Their behavior often follows a predictable script. Provoke, observe the reaction, then adjust to maintain control. Every emotional response they receive becomes information they can use. If you explain yourself, they reinterpret it. If you argue, they escalate or deflect. If you show hurt, they recognize a point of leverage. This back and forth gives them structure, something to work with and manipulate. When silence replaces that response, the structure disappears. There is no data to analyze, no emotion to reshape, no engagement to pull from. Detachment removes the emotional hooks they rely on, creating a gap where their usual strategies have nothing to attach to. It forces them into uncertainty because they can't predict or guide what happens next. Instead of controlling the interaction, they are left reacting to avoid. Detachment also changes the perceived value dynamic. When someone stops investing emotionally, it signals that the connection no longer holds the same importance. For a narcissist, this feels like a loss of relevance rather than just a loss of connection. Without visible effort or concern from you, they can't confirm their role in your world. The absence of reaction becomes louder than any argument because it communicates disinterest without explanation, removing the opportunity for them to twist meaning or regain control through conversation or emotional influence. A final decision sounds absolute, but in a narcissistic dynamic, it often carries an assumption that it will be challenged, negotiated, or emotionally resisted. The authority behind that decision isn't rooted in certainty. It depends on how much weight others give it. When someone reacts by questioning, pushing back, or trying to fix things, it reinforces the illusion that the decision holds power. The narcissist interprets that engagement as proof that they still define the direction of the situation. When there is no pushback, the nature of that decision becomes exposed. It is no longer a tool for control. It is simply a statement that stands on its own. Without emotional resistance, there is nothing amplifying it, nothing turning it into a moment of dominance. The absence of reaction strips away the performative aspect, revealing that the authority they assumed was never fully theirs. It was co-created through interaction. This creates a subtle but significant shift. Instead of being the one who dictates the emotional outcome, they are left with a decision that doesn't move anything or anyone. It doesn't provoke, it doesn't influence, it doesn't reshape the dynamic. It just exists. That realization can feel destabilizing because it contradicts the expectation that their choices automatically carry impact. What's revealed in that moment is that their authority was conditional. It relied on participation, on emotional investment, on someone else engaging with it. Remove that participation, and the decision loses its ability to control the narrative, leaving behind a reality where influence cannot be assumed or enforced. When you walk away without resistance, you remove the emotional friction that a narcissist unconsciously depends on to make sense of the situation. Conflict, persuasion, or even visible hurt creates a familiar pattern where they can position themselves as the one in control. That tension gives them something to respond to, something to shape and manipulate. It keeps the interaction alive and predictable, even if it appears chaotic on the surface. When that resistance is missing, the situation becomes psychologically incomplete. There's no clear signal that the outcome had the expected impact. Instead of feeling affirmed, they are left with unanswered questions. They may start replaying the moment, trying to identify what went wrong or why the usual reaction didn't occur. This creates internal conflict because their expectation of influence clashes with the reality of your detachment. Without resistance, there is also no opportunity for them to reinforce their role. They can't step in to justify their decision, can't provoke further emotion, and can't regain momentum through interaction. The absence of engagement forces them into a passive position where they are no longer directing the dynamic, but instead observing a result they didn't anticipate. This shift can be deeply unsettling because it removes the feedback loop they rely on to feel effective. Instead of confirming their control, the situation highlights its limits. They are left confronting a version of the outcome where their actions no longer produce predictable emotional responses, creating a tension between what they expected to happen and what actually unfolds. Indifference removes the emotional leverage a narcissist relies on more completely than anger, sadness, or confrontation ever could. Strong emotions, even negative ones, still signal investment. They show that the connection has weight and that their actions can influence your internal state. This gives them something to work with, something they can provoke, reshape, or pull back into interaction. Indifference, however, communicates something entirely different. It suggests that their presence, choices, and behavior no longer carry significance. This is difficult for them to process because it offers no clear entry point for control. There's nothing to challenge, nothing to defend against, and nothing to escalate. Emotional reactions create movement, but indifference creates stillness. In that stillness, their usual strategies lose effectiveness because there is no response to amplify or redirect. Attempts to regain attention may increase, but without engagement, those attempts fall flat. Indifference also disrupts the identity they build around influence. If they cannot affect how you feel or behave, it contradicts the belief that they hold a central role in your world. This creates a subtle but persistent tension because their sense of importance is no longer being reinforced through your reactions. What makes indifference especially powerful is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't explain or justify. It simply exists as a lack of emotional participation, leaving them in a position where their efforts to create impact are met with absence rather than resistance, making control impossible to reestablish through familiar patterns. What makes this dynamic even more powerful is that it shifts everything from reaction to awareness. Most people don't realize how much of their behavior is being subtly guided by someone else's expectations until they step out of the pattern. A narcissist isn't just reacting in the moment. They are often anticipating your response based on past interactions. That anticipation is what gives them confidence. They believe they already know how you will feel, what you will say, and how far they can push before you try to pull things back together. When you break that expectation, it creates a kind of psychological gap. Suddenly, their internal model of you stops working. The version of you they relied on, predictable, responsive, emotionally available in a way they could influence, no longer exists in the same form. This forces them into unfamiliar territory where they have to confront uncertainty instead of control. And uncertainty is something they tend to avoid because it removes their ability to manage outcomes. There's also a deeper layer to this that most people overlook. When you accept their final decision without resistance, you are not just withdrawing from them. You are reclaiming your own narrative. You are deciding that your emotional state is no longer tied to their choices. That shift is quiet, but it is absolute. It changes the entire power dynamic because control can no longer flow in one direction. Over time, this creates distance that isn't just physical or situational, but psychological. Their influence fades not because they stop trying, but because there is nothing left to connect to. Without emotional access, their presence loses its impact and the dynamic dissolves on its own, leaving behind a space where their patterns no longer reach and their control no longer defines the outcome. Another layer to this is how deeply people are conditioned to seek closure, especially when something ends abruptly or without explanation. A narcissist often relies on that need. By creating confusion or leaving things unresolved, they increase the chances that you'll come back looking for answers. That search for clarity becomes a doorway back into the dynamic where they can reestablish influence. But when you stop chasing closure and accept what's in front of you as final, even if it feels incomplete, you close that doorway yourself. There's also a subtle shift in identity that happens when you no longer engage. Before, part of your focus may have been tied to understanding them, predicting their behavior, or managing the emotional ups and downs they created. When you detach, that focus returns to you. You start noticing how much energy was being directed outward, and how much clarity comes back when that energy is no longer being pulled in different directions. This isn't just about them losing control, it's about you regaining stability. Over time, their attempts to regain attention can become more obvious. They may circle back in indirect ways, testing whether the connection is still available. What used to trigger a response might now feel distant or even irrelevant. That's because the emotional link they depended on has weakened. Without that link, their behavior loses its ability to pull you in. The dynamic eventually reaches a point where their presence no longer creates the same internal reaction. What once felt intense or confusing becomes predictable and easy to see through. And in that clarity, their influence doesn't just shrink, it becomes unnecessary, leaving you in a position where your decisions, your emotions, and your direction are no longer shaped by their actions. In the end, The real shift happens the moment you stop trying to change what they've already decided. You don't argue, you don't chase, and you don't try to prove your worth. You simply allow their decision to exist without giving it control over you. That's where everything turns. Because the power they seemed to have was never in their words or actions alone. It was in the reactions they could pull from you. Once that reaction is gone, the dynamic loses its foundation. What once felt overwhelming becomes clear, and what once felt powerful becomes ordinary. Letting them live with their final decision isn't weakness, it's clarity. It shows that you no longer need validation, explanations, or closure from someone who depended on your response to feel in control. And in that silence, in that steady detachment, you take back something far more valuable than the relationship itself. You take back your independence, your focus, and your direction. What remains is simple. They keep their decision, and you keep your peace.